Let's move it on then, shall we, to one of the other teams before we come on to George Russell and another great display, nursing those softs for all those laps at the end post the safety car. But a story that is gathering pace, and Ted, that you saw a little bit of evidence of in your notebook afterwards was what's going on at Red Bull. Now we understand that they've got a correlation problem with the wind tunnel, and it's moving into race weekends now. And they're sort of struggling and having to do all the data analysis and revolve their setup around data that they're gathering at the track rather than trusting the stuff that's coming from the wind tunnel and the simulator. And that's on this occasion, it's affected the balance of the car, the grip of the car, or the grip of the tires, and also Max's braking, which he was complaining about all weekend. He then finishes sixth, which is respectable, bearing in mind the problems that they had with that car. But how deep is the crisis? And what about that argument that we hear about between Raymond Vermeulen, who's Max's manager, and Dr. Helmut Marko after the race?
Red Bull is facing real pressure, and Max's reaction on and off the track might be the biggest clue. Check this video out.
Well, I don't know. I mean, that was something I saw, and I've seen plenty of times where Raymond Vermeulen or Jos Verstappen and Christian Horner and Helmut Marko have been discussing situations, but this was particularly Raymond seemed particularly irked about something, which I think was actually the pit stop problems. And we've got short memories, haven't we, Simon? Not 2 weeks ago, we were saying that Max Verstappen is definitely back in the World Championship, having dominated pretty much. Well, maybe not dominated was the word, but his fantastic performance in Japan on pole and winning the Grand Prix. So let's be a bit careful with this. And they would have known, Red Bull would have known from testing that they weren't as quick as the McLarens, and actually not as quick as the Mercedes as well. So there were pretty much no surprises. I think what the Verstappens were annoyed about, what Raymond Vermeulen was annoyed about, and Max said this as well, was that when everything isn't so great on the car, at least we need to have good pit stops and good operational things going wrong. And actually, if you count the slow pit stop that Max had in Japan that put him into conflict with Lando Norris when Lando went on the grass, and then you count out light number one not working for Max, light number two not working for Yuki, and then front right not working for Max on his second stop in Bahrain, that's four, for all those I can count, happily I can, and I've got the fingers to help me, that's four pit stop problems that Red Bull have had in 2 races. And that's very unusual.
How often do you see Red Bull miss the basics like pit stops? 4 times in 2 races? That's not just rare, it's disruptive for a team that usually runs like clockwork. When Verstappen is already dealing with wind tunnel issues and braking instability, these small mistakes add up fast. Can a championship team afford this kind of sloppiness in a midfield squeeze? This is a systems issue, and it's showing up at the worst possible time.
Now, of course, cause effect, these things happen. If Jonathan Wheatley was still there, would these things be happening? Probably. The electronics in the pit stop traffic light system don't know that Jonathan Wheatley is now the Sauber team principal and has left. Jonathan Wheatley didn't spend his evenings going and making sure the reprogramming of the traffic light system in the pit stops is working. And it's probably nothing on the front right that Jonathan Wheatley could have done. It's a coincidence. But when things aren't happening like that, and it did cost, Bernie, did you go and have a look? So I thought that Max came out, it did cost Max and Yuki 1 place each. I think I said at the time on the commentary that those slow pit stops. Max was stuck behind Esteban Ocon for a while, and Yuki was stuck behind Isaac Hadjar, although got past him quite quickly.
Yeah, I think I agree with you on the commentary. I think just to pick up on one thing is I'm a bit skeptical about the coincidence. Red Bull used to be the fastest by and far at pit stops. They've sort of moved their focus a bit to consistency over the last few years, which is why we've seen, the McLaren 1.8 in Qatar that we've seen, they've stopped focusing on being faster and faster.
Remember when Red Bull's pit crew was the gold standard? What changed? If consistency has replaced speed as their priority, is it actually delivering either? Max getting stuck behind Ocon, Yuki losing a position, it all adds up. Red Bull may be aiming for consistency, but right now they're achieving the opposite, and it's costing them.
So what has changed? So when I was in China, we'd seen them doing the test in the Ferrari pit stop in post race. So have they been forced to change something in their system on the traffic lights? Because it's very unusual to have a system for so long that now you've got this traffic light. Generally, teams set this up, test it on Thursday. The car doesn't obviously leave the box then, but you tend to do a live stop on Friday, which would mean that you've fully tested the equipment. Again, you test the equipment as it is on Sunday morning. We see them on Sunday in the pit lane, all the crew with the helmets on, full car in the pit lane. And that test is meant to be nothing's changing from that point into the race. So how did that test not pick up an issue that the first two pit stops had is a question. Now, again, the car doesn't leave the pit stop in that situation, but these systems gather a lot of data that should be fit to do it. So yes, the pit stop system doesn't know that Jonathan Whateley has gone, but is there something that Red Bull have been forced to change in their pit stop equipment that has led to 4 bad pit stops in 2 weeks? Because that's, like you say, highly unusual for Red Bull. Or maybe
Okay.
a crew member's changed. I don't know, but it stands out to me as being not normal for Red Bull by some stretch.
If nothing's changed in the system, why does it suddenly keep failing? Could it be a subtle change in FIA pit lane regulations or hardware tweaks no one's publicly acknowledging? Something isn't adding up, and Verstappen's races are paying the price. This level of inconsistency would be shocking from any top-tier team, but from Red Bull, it's unprecedented.
Sorry, this is very pit stop heavy, Simon, but I find it unusual when they come out and said, "Oh, the first pit stop, we just thought the guy pressed his button incorrectly, and then we didn't think anything would be wrong on the second pit stop." Now, maybe it's just the time wasn't enough to check it, but all those checks are possible in the data, or should be possible in the data for someone to go and look, why did that one go wrong? But
Either way, I mean, the thing is, when Jonathan Wheatley was in charge, it was 7 years, wasn't it, winning that pit stop prize. This year it's Ferrari, perhaps surprisingly, that are regularly the quickest in the pit stops. But either way, that was just one of the reasons. But to come back to the question that I asked Ted originally, and Ted saying, yes, it is only a week since Suzuka where we saw him being masterful. Is his driving masking a deeper problem, I suppose, is the question I'm asking with regards to Red Bull and to Max Verstappen, because it's obvious from the radio communications. He's actually remained fairly level-headed throughout all of this one. It's just you understand when they're having meetings so soon afterwards, and it's involving Paul Monahan, it's involving Raymond, it's involving Max, it's involving Dr. Marco and Christian. All of the big cheeses are discussing what's happening here. And there's clearly an issue with the wind tunnel because of the correlation. The new one comes online in 2027. But for the moment, can they address it? And is Spain and the changes to the TDs in Spain going to be as big an effect as they think it is?
When all the top figures at Red Bull are huddling post-race, you know it's not just bad luck. The pit issues, the wind tunnel discrepancies, the lack of correlation, this isn't isolated. If everything's fine at Red Bull, why does it feel like they're in damage control mode after every race? Max's calm might just be professionalism, but could it also be frustration boiling under the surface? Are we witnessing the start of a bigger unraveling? Spain might be a true litmus test for how deep this problem goes.
After Japan, Christian could have said and put the season into context, what Max did today was absolutely fantastic, given that we're not sure about what we're seeing coming out of our wind tunnel. We think we might have a correlation problem, which they had last year. I remember him saying this to you last year, didn't he, Simon? That we got a correlation problem.
But second half of 2024, but it's reared its head again because they don't feel like they're getting the data. In fact, what Max says was, yes, we tried everything with the car, nothing works. I don't want to hear about how many upgrades are coming or how much of a difference it should make. I just want them to come and we'll see how much it delivers. So I think that's as strong as he's been this year.
Yeah, I did think that, Suzuka was one where Max made the difference that qualifying lap, and then from then on, with the race that we had, was able to control it. Jeddah's potentially another track for that because the qualifying lap's going to be really, really important, and it's about bravery, how close you're going to take it to the walls, control of the car. So, Max is going to be quite difficult there to beat as well. But the correlation issue, if that's the case, has been going on from the middle of last year, not on top of it. You can't be holding on for a wind tunnel, a new wind tunnel that you're still not sure the correlation of coming online in 2027. It's a bit far
Yeah.
down the line. And it is. We always have this thing, from an engineering point of view. An engineer will say, "This new front wing, we're estimating it's worth half a tenth or a tenth or whatever it is," and it maybe doesn't always deliver exactly that on track. So to pick up on Max's point of he doesn't want to hear what it's worth, there'll always be slight differences in what the wind tunnel says and what happens on track. But the difficulty would be if it's not bringing any improvement or bringing improvement in the wrong areas or making the car more nervous or more difficult to drive. Um, all of those things end up in a negative spiral. And if you get into this frantic thing of changing lots of things at once, it's very difficult to figure out actually where the issues are coming then as well. So that is something they need to get on top of pretty quickly if they can.
If Max Verstappen is already saying nothing works, what happens when the margins really tighten? Can Red Bull afford to keep promising upgrades while the correlation gap keeps widening? At some point, patience runs out. Red Bull's margin for error is vanishing.
I wonder if it's something at the rear as well, because Ayumu Iwasa on Friday, free practice one, in Verstappen's car, the car was festooned, Simon. It was festooned with aero rakes, but in really specific areas that I hadn't seen before, like off the rear wheels. And there was one kind of midway in the engine cover, all to the rear. These aero rakes, they weren't. You could easily miss them because they were quite small and thin. But Iwasa was doing a lot of the sort of correlation stuff and the aero measuring in Bahrain. So yeah, that might point to what it is. And maybe Max says, "Look, I don't want to hear about the upgrades," but they'll have they know their onions at Red Bull. Even with a correlation issue, they'll have an idea saying, "Okay, well, in the past we've done that and it hasn't actually correlated to that, but it has done this on the or the other." So they'll have a slightly much of a workaround. They can't be completely in the dark, can they? The car's not that bad.
No, but you just wonder how long this. We talk about the lack of noise in Oscar Piastri's head. I wonder how much noise there is in everybody in Red Bull management and drivers' heads with everything that's going on at the moment. It just feels to me like it can't go on for 3 or 4 more races like this, with Max having to drive around the problems without the question, which is definitely rearing its head in the paddock again, is it not, Ted and Bernie? That availability for 2026, Max will want to be in the best car. Is he going to be patient enough, do you think, to wait to see who is best on track in 2026? Or is he going to go, "I'm going with Mercedes, I'm going with Aston Martin. They seem to be the only two in with a run of it"?
Is Max's patience with these car issues the real ticking clock for Red Bull? He's made it clear he's not waiting forever, and with top teams like Mercedes and Aston Martin looking stronger, will Max start making moves toward a more stable future? While they're working on fixes, Max is still driving with a bit of uncertainty in the back of his mind. How long will this tug of war between car development and driver satisfaction last?